Welcome to this orientation for new board members of Edmund Rice Christian Brothers Schools. This is Sister Grace D'Amico, Associate Director of the Office of Educational Services. I hope you will find this presentation helpful and that you will feel free to contact me afterward. My contact information will appear at the end of the presentation. We will cover these three areas. You can pause the presentation after each topic to jot down comments and questions. All of the research for this section involves my personal memories, except for the covered wagon, and is based on my experience in the United States. Governance structures might have been different in Canada, and I invite you to share your experiences. You yourself might have attended Catholic school, possibly elementary school, high school, and even college. If so, recall whether it was a parish school or a diocesan school. Was it staffed by brothers or sisters or priests? In the United States, there were three kinds of schools: parish, diocesan, and independent schools, though we didn't speak of them that way. Decades ago, all Catholic schools were, for the most part, administered and staffed by religious. In more recent years, they were joined by lay men and women teachers. Who made the decisions? There were no boards in those days. In parish schools, religious superiors assigned the school principal and the religious teachers. The principal worked with and was answerable to the pastor. In diocesan schools, the bishop governed through diocesan school offices. In independent schools, the principals, generally brothers, sisters, or priests, were answerable to their religious provincial superiors. Eventually, most independent Catholic schools became legally incorporated. Because a civil corporation requires a board, boards were created, but for the most part the board was the provincial leadership team or council. When a new council came into office, there was a new board. Then along came the Second Vatican Council in the early 1960s. Changes in the church and society began to impact Catholic schools and the way they were governed and financed. Catholic schools changed. We've all lived through these changes, whether as students, parents, or teachers. There was a decline in the number of brothers, sisters, and priests to administer and staff Catholic schools. We religious could no longer operate our schools like family businesses. We needed special expertise, for example, financial, legal, real estate, fundraising, and managerial expertise, all the gifts that you bring. At the same time, there was a greater appreciation of laity in the church. The needs of the schools and the abilities and willingness of Catholics like you came together. Lay volunteers like yourselves, who appreciated and were committed to Catholic school education, stepped forward to assist religious as boards of directors who would govern the schools. Please pause the program to address your questions and comments to your facilitator or to jot them down for a future opportunity to discuss them. If you've served on your school board for some time or other nonprofit school boards, then these responsibilities will be very familiar to you. In any nonprofit organization or school, the role of the board is governance. With the mission of the organization or school in mind, it sets direction, provides oversight, and ensures the necessary resources. The board has only one employee, the president or head of school. The board governs, makes policies, and the president or head of school sees that they are carried out. In this situation, good mutual relationships are key. Let's take a look at the range of board responsibilities. Here are the major financial responsibilities: approve the annual budget, allocate resources, review financial performance and investments, ensure that audits are conducted annually, and review the reports. The board has to attend to the long-term viability of the organization or school, including facilities, growth, and financial sustainability. The board has to create and/or approve policies and ensure that they are followed. Here's a sampling of policies. As you review the list, do you know if your board has these policies? The board also has to ensure legal compliance. The board doesn't have to compose the policies and procedures, but it does have to review and approve them. School handbooks are considered contracts, so this is something that has to be taken very seriously. The Association of Governing Boards suggests that this is how the responsibilities might look in a school. Clarify and/or affirm the mission, evaluate mission effectiveness, recommend, support, and evaluate the head of school, approve long-range plans, approve the educational program, ensure that the school's performance is assessed, ensure the well-being and safety of the community. This is their expression of the financial responsibilities. Ensure adequate financial resources and effective management. Ensure adequate and well-maintained facilities. The board must represent and advocate for the school to the community. And finally, it is always a good idea for a board to assess its own performance periodically. So, to review the board's role in governance thus far. The board's role is governance. The board acts as a whole, acts as one. The board chair relates to the president, head of school. The board makes policy, but does not implement it. That's the job of the executive, to see that the mission is accomplished and that policies are followed. A healthy mutual relationship with good communication is key to fostering the mission. That was all about the board as a group. Now we're going to talk about the individual board member. In Christian Brothers schools, we have boards of directors, so we are talking about the individual director here. As individuals, board directors have an obligation to act in accordance with these legal standards. They have the duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. In practice, these duties are performed by fulfilling various responsibilities. Showing up prepared and knowledgeable is key. Knowing and observing conflict of interest policies is very important. Be willing to take on some special work. In most cases, directors are expected to contribute financially as their means allow. And of course, serve as an ambassador to the community. It's important to become familiar with the essential elements of a Christian Brother education and how they are lived out in the school. At board meetings, ask questions about how decisions you are about to make might contribute to the mission and reflect the Edmund Rice vision. Lastly, a word about the role of the individual director. The director has no individual position, standing, or authority within the school community. His or her only power is to vote as a member of the board. This is because the board acts as one. Please pause the program for questions and comments. While Catholic school boards are similar in many ways to secular nonprofit boards, there are some important differences. Catholic schools, no matter who governs or administers them, are ministries of the Catholic Church. Therefore, the Church has a compelling interest in them in two major areas: mission, proclaiming the gospel, carrying out the teaching ministry of Jesus, and assets, tangible resources to be used in carrying out the mission. Catholic schools exist in two worlds. The civic world of nonprofit corporations. They are subject to federal, state, and local laws and regulations. And the Catholic sphere. Schools operate under the aegis of legitimate church authority known as a public juridic person, the church equivalent of a civil corporation. Therefore, they must also abide by canon law, which is the Church's law. Ordinarily, to be considered Catholic, a school or other ministry, for example a hospital, has to be operated under the aegis of a public juridic person, a church authority, either an archdiocese or diocese or a religious congregation, for example Edmund Rice Christian Brothers, Jesuits, School Sisters of Notre Dame, Mercy Sisters, etc. Some religious congregations use the term sponsorship to describe this relationship. This public juridic person has the responsibility of looking after the Church's interests. The mission, that is, spreading the gospel through, for example, education, health care, or social service, and patrimony, tangible assets, resources to be used to accomplish the mission. This generally includes real estate, properties and buildings, and investments like trusts. How are the mission and assets safeguarded? In independent Catholic schools like Edmund Rice Christian Brothers schools, they are safeguarded by having a two-tier board. Some final decisions remain in the hands of, or are reserved to, the church authority, that is, the religious congregation or diocese. This top tier has reserved powers. Generally, the individuals are called members of the corporation. In Christian Brother schools, they are also called the trustees. These brothers are currently members or trustees of each school corporation. These are the schools that currently operate under the Edmund Rice Christian Brother jurisdiction. In diocesan or archdiocesan schools and in our Canadian schools, the trustees or members would be the bishop and other appointed diocesan officials. Sometimes boards in diocesan schools are referred to as boards of limited jurisdiction. These are the Christian Brother schools that currently operate under the jurisdiction of their local bishop or archbishop. The reserved powers are articulated in the bylaws, Appendix J, of the Board Handbook. They pertain to the mission, the assets, and the corporation itself, because the religious congregation is entrusted with conducting these apostolic works. Here are the reserved powers for Christian Brother schools under mission. Philosophy and purpose, selection and dismissal of the chief administrator, considering the recommendations of the board, selection and dismissal of the board of directors. Because the brothers hold each school as a sacred trust, as a ministry of the Catholic Church, they have the responsibility to see that the mission is implemented. Reserved powers cover the tangible assets because they are the patrimony, the treasure of the Church. The board makes decisions in the following areas, but financial oversight requires these approvals by the trustees or members. Approval of budgeted expenses beyond the specified amount. Approval of borrowing. Regarding real property and assets, the members or trustees have to approve acquisition, encumbrance, and disposal. The third area relates to the corporation itself, which the religious congregation established to carry out its apostolic works. These are the reserved powers of the trustees: amending the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws, merging and consolidation, dissolution of the corporation, and distribution of the assets. You can see why it is so essential for the directors and the trustees to communicate well and work together. Directors have to be aware of decisions that will require the approval of the trustees and bring them into the conversation early. This is necessary to further the mission of the school, to be faithful to the Edmund Rice vision, to ensure the viability of the school, and to remain a Christian Brothers school. Here are a few situations where reserved powers come into play. The school needs to purchase property for new playing fields. The president decides to retire. A local middle school wants to become part of your school. It's time to build a new gym. The school is no longer financially viable. Please pause the program and share instances where reserved powers came into play in your school or where they might in the future. Catholic schools, including those operated by the Christian Brothers or other religious communities, are located in dioceses and therefore relate to the local church. Catholic schools have an obligation to promote their Catholic identity and to help transmit the faith to their students. This includes complying with church teaching. Unlike parish or diocesan schools, schools governed by religious communities have traditionally remained fairly independent of their respective dioceses, but may still be required to comply with certain diocesan regulations. It seems to me that in the past, local bishops tended not to bother much with schools operated by religious congregations. However, that may be changing now, and some dioceses are even instituting norms for accrediting Catholic schools. Generally, a bishop doesn't get involved in the governance of independent schools, but as the primary teacher in his diocese, he does have the right to ask questions and intervene if necessary. The bishop's concern is the Catholicity of the school, so there may be requirements, even for independent Catholic schools like ours, in these areas of concern. I think it's a good idea for board members to be aware of the requirements in a particular diocese and how the school complies with them. Our Christian Brother schools are required to have periodic evaluation on their living of the essential elements of a Christian Brother's education. And while these essential elements don't say anything about complying with regulations, they express very explicitly how important Catholic values are in the school. They refer to evangelization and the mission of the Church, proclaiming and witnessing to Catholic identity, Catholic social teaching, and a community of faith. These essential elements proclaim actions worthy of individuals created in God's image with enormous potential and who also have responsibilities. As board members, find out when the essential elements evaluation will be at your school and participate in the self-study process and visit. Then be sure to read the report from the Office of Educational Services about the visit. Thank you for viewing this presentation. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me, Sister Grace D'Amico, SSND, at the Office of Educational Services.